Hello, and welcome to today's Skill Up session from ITIL and PeopleCert, powered by Techstrong. I'm your host, Ariko Lewinsky, and today we're going to be talking about how reporting and analytics are applied to service management. On our panel today, we have Peter Madison and David Tomlinson, who also goes by Tomo. Welcome. Before we get started, I want to let the audience know that this program is live and being recorded so you can view it again for on demand. Also, there are chat and QA boxes on the right side of your screen to communicate with the general audience in chat and questions for the speakers. Let's start off with some introductions. So I'm Orit. I'm the VP of Product Management at JIT. I also bring a wealth of product management experience to drive innovation. Prior to this role, I was director of product management at GitLab, where I played a pivotal role in shaping the company's product strategy. And I had a diverse career in the tech industry, where I also had key leadership positions at Celebrite, including director of product, director of R&D, director of QA. And as an ambassador at the DevOps Institute, I'm also passionately advocating for the human aspects of DevOps. Tomo, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I started in tech 4.5 decades ago, and I've done quite a few jobs around the place since then. My background was both in good old-fashioned IT and telecoms. I did 26 years in the military, in the Royal Corps of Signals, so I'm still a techie. I'm also a DevOps Institute ambassador, and I'm a trainer and consultant with QA here in the UK. And I work across service management. I contributed to the Certified Agile Service Management course. And I also teach Agile and a bit of project management to keep my hand in. So that's me. I'm a confirmed geek, and anybody who wants to join me as a geek, you are amongst friends.
Thank you. Peter, please introduce yourself.
I'm Peter Madison, and I am a managing partner at Zodiac, a company I founded in Toronto. We do consulting and much like Tomo, across a wide range of areas, but mostly focused on the people and process side of transformation. And how do you get the most out of your technology and align it into your business processes? So that's I've been doing this not quite as long as Tomo, but a good 25, 30 years now, I think, in a variety of different roles and areas. And one of the areas I focus a lot on is DevOps strategy. And I am a DevOps Institute ambassador as well.
Well, great. So let's get started with some of the questions that we have for the panelists. And please write any questions that you have in the Q&A box. So let's get started with talking about what are the key benefits of incorporating analytics into IT service management, and how does it improve operations? Peter, why don't you get us started?
Sure. So I mean, there's obviously benefits of understanding, like, what is the state of your environment, and capturing this information gives you lots of visibility, so you can go back and look at, like, what's happening, where do I have the biggest problems, how am I handling that? And when we start to look at this overall, having just the aggregate of, like, how many instances am I having, how many problems I'm having, how rapidly am I solving these, how quickly do I get my systems back online, and we'll start to dig into sort of what sort of things you should report on, I assume, through the course of the conversation. But there's a lot of value in understanding what is the state of my environment, and am I surfacing the right information to be able to make decisions and learn about my environment and how I can go about improving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Peter, I can echo that, but I always remember that the map's not the territory. In other words, yes, we always have an understanding, and analytics will tell us quite a bit. But fundamentally, the reality, there's always going to be a gap. There's always going to be that delta between the two, where the unexpected will occur despite our analytics. So analytics gets you so far, but where we as humans come in is the bit between where the analytics run out and the gut feeling has to kick in to be able to take action. And I'm always amazed how people claim to be data driven, but they're quite happy to ignore the data when they want to. So even though analytics is quite scientific, behind the science is the art of human beings, because fundamentally how we view statistics and how we then make sense of them is very much a human emotion thing. And I love the way that people will game a statistic. I want this number to go up, and so amazingly by next month the number's gone up. Nothing actually changed, but we can manipulate them. And I think that there is this point is that what we measure drives our behavior, and what we choose to analyze and the way we analyze it is inbuilt to how we think and believe our systems work. So yes, I really enjoy the analytics, but we are fooling ourselves if we think there still isn't a human element to it. And I think it's that interpretation, which is where experience comes in. And the reason we're not going to get replaced by AI is because those people with experience, what's the expression they use in the US? This is not their first rodeo. Those people who have been there before have a tendency to be able to look at the analytics and tell the story that's coming back a little more accurately. So for me, it's always the story behind the story rather than the numbers themselves.
So it's interesting, both of you talked about what we measure and measuring the right thing. And I think that's the $1 million question. How do we know what you need to measure when we're talking about service management?
It depends what story you want to tell. Tomo was saying.
Yeah.
So the right things to measure, the things which are going to enable you to understand and tell the story about the environment. A lot of the time, as Tom was saying, it's people measure the thing that will support the story they want to tell, the decisions that they want others to make. So say, hey, look, here's a bunch of metrics that tell everybody that I'm true. So the data-driven people in the room will now agree with me. So I've at least won over some friends. And the more instinctual people potentially in the room will need a little bit more convincing, but I'll find other ways to convince them. But at least I've won some fans over by coming up with the data that they want to see and the numbers which I've carefully constructed to prove my point. So there's that element of it for sure.
So I want to kind of go back to the original question, which is how do we use these kind of metrics and analytics to improve operations? And so we've been talking about looking at the data, but how does it actually improve the day-to-day in the operations?
I think one of the things we need to look at here is I love the, everyone could be my fan when everything's going well. Everyone's a fan of somebody who's whopping along and the thing's working, right? Nobody wants to be your friend when it's failing. Right? We all know in service management what it feels like to be if you want the expression, the Johnny on the spot when it's all going wrong and everybody turns to you for a solution. And so most of us know what that feels like at some point in our careers, some more than others. But I think it's not looking at the successes. It's not looking at, oh, look at us, look at our first time resolution. Isn't that wonderful? First contact resolution numbers are up. But how many misdiagnosed incidents am I having? How many screw ups have I got? That's really where you get the improvements from. The uncomfortable metric that nobody really wants to talk about is that 15% are being misdiagnosed. That means our service desk is either the knowledge base is broken, or the service desk is living in a little Pollyanna world where things are maybe a bit too cute and too nice, where actually they need to be a bit more cynical. The reopen rates. How many of these things come back to haunt us when we think we've closed them? These are the awkward metrics that people don't like measuring because they exposed your skirts, they exposed your petticoats. So you don't want to talk about those. And they're exactly the ones we should be using because there's little to learn from success. There are acres and acres of stuff to be gotten from not so much failure, but that thing you're not doing too well. And yet often, although, our service management tools will spit all this stuff out, they're the ones that tend not to get reported on because it is, what percentage of our incidents are being matched to problem, because that's telling us our knowledge base is working. And when it's not working, it tells us we need to go and do something. There's no point having a retrospective about this and going, everything's wonderful, aren't we brilliant? It'll get you a pay rise, but it's not going to make it any better. What we need to do is look at those areas which are discomforting, those that are, disconfirming, because that's the piece that we need to take away and say, why? And not just once, 3-4 levels of why, because that's where we get down to the point of where improvement comes. But no,
I love it.
Playing to your strengths is easy. Playing to your strengths is easy.
Great. So awkward analytics is the key here. Peter, do you have something to add?
There's a piece there that Tom was touching on around you need to have an environment where people are comfortable talking about these. So a lot of the reason that they will avoid talking about them is that it isn't safe to do so. It's like, hey, if I speak up and say, oh my God, like we've got all of these sort of reopened incidents over here, which means we haven't been doing a good job. I'm going to get fired for doing that, or I'm like, the people are going to come down on me like a ton of bricks because we're not doing a good job of this. And if your environment is such that it isn't safe for people to say, hey, we need to take a look at this, and have that uncomfortable conversation, then that's really the first place you need to start, is how do we make it safer to have that conversation and people to speak up?
Well said. So maybe from the two of your experience, could you provide examples of how actionable intelligence derived from analytics has positively impacted IT service management in your experience?
I think one of the most awkward ones we had was when talking about misdiagnosis. How many times because we had a situation where we were operating the service desk, but we had lots of third parties, which we then had to escalate to. And if you escalated it the wrong way, of course, there was all kinds of problems to repoint and bring it back again, often contractually. And we even had 2 contractors who wouldn't talk to each other because they were competitors. So, if anyone's ever been there. So getting the misdiagnosis wrong was really difficult. And echoing what Peter said, yeah, we were very fortunate. And I was dealing with, the military and civil servants who you couldn't fire. so they weren't fearful of their jobs, and they were quite happy, therefore, to call it how it was. And admit that that was my fault. I didn't, I missaw that. Whereas I think that it's more sensitive. If you've got people who are day contractors and can be fired at will, they're not going to be quite so forthcoming. And I also think it's how you phrase it. If you start measuring individuals, if you start talking about utilization or productivity of one service desk analyst over another, or one star problem manager over another, you will drive the hiding of these problems. The key is to understand that we win as a team or we lose as a team. It's the team. It's not an individual show. And I think part of the problem, no leader is going to be credible until that moment when it has all gone wrong and you take one for the team and you stand up and go, hey, I'm not having a witch hunt here. We all did it. Let's move on. And it's only once people have done that, you then get the credibility. So for me, it was our misdiagnosis, analytics, and then being honest about it that meant that we put the knowledge in place. And it was drawing that discussion when somebody went, well, hey, I wouldn't have done that because of this. And we went, we never knew that was connected. We discovered things in the analysis of that maybe 1 or 2 of us knew, but the rest of the team didn't. And it's that surfacing of those misdiagnoses, those misunderstandings, which actually then means that we had something like a 15% misdiagnosis went down to 3% in the space of a few weeks, because it became a thing. It became, a reason. But fundamentally, could we slip back? Well, of course you could. All it takes is a few key people to leave. Unless you record that knowledge, unless you build it into your tool, unless you've found a way to, make it, immutable in your system, then you always risk, rolling back and having to learn that lesson all over again with somebody else in the future. But certainly misdiagnosis was one, because it's such a human thing. We've all done it. to put your hands up and go, yeah, that was me. I thought it was X, but it was really Y. Then why did you think that? And once everyone believes that everyone is acting in the best of intentions, using the information they have to hand, then the witch hunt stops, because that's got to be the assumption that in a given set of circumstances, with the same information, people would probably do that again. And that's the point. Let's find out what's underneath that.
Yep. How about you, Peter? Do you have a story to share from your experience?
I think on a similar line of defensive metrics, and where we've got identification of an issue that where we got a vendor who's coming in, and you've got an external system saying, okay, our system has zero impact on anything that's happening. And then we go, well, actually, we can tie it back to every single time you've turned this system on. And we've got the records to be able to show it, that every time you've turned this on, we've had a hit to latency. We've seen it. It's like, so your zero impact clearly has an impact. And there are many other things happening in the system, but we can sort of point at this and say fairly consistently that the turn on of this system has a direct-ish impact on the performance that we're looking for. So that historical evidence of incidents where they've occurred, be able to pull out the data and then play it back, and also be able to do that with people who are non-technical as well, to be able to say, where you've got people saying, well, all our customers are complaining and all of these problems are occurring, and to be able to come back and say, well, actually, we've got better, and we're still identifying them, but can you give us some specific examples, and helping, because it can help people to calm down and get off their high horse occasionally. They come with
I love that. I think that the fact that analytics gives you a window into things that you have no idea about, and all of a sudden you can connect the dots like that, is very powerful. I mean, there's a survey that was conducted not on service management, but really interesting, where they were looking at velocity of engineers, and they were trying to figure out when is velocity higher, and this company that was doing this experiment found out that they changed the coffee machine in the kitchen, and all of a sudden velocity spiked. So it's really interesting to find like unrelated services or unrelated tools that are introduced into the system, and what effect they can actually have on the different aspects. So really interesting. Let's move on to a very hot topic. And I'll ask you, how do you see artificial intelligence complementing data analytics in context of IT service management? And can you provide use cases where AI-driven insights have been particularly valuable?
Well, I heard Tomo describing some things which I came in partway through before this, so I think I'll let him go first because I want to hear the rest of the story.
Yeah, I think the my nonsense meter on the internet tends to go off the scale when AI gets mentioned. AI is very good at what it does, but it's also not quite what we think it's going to be. What AI is very good at is pattern matching and making predictions from that. It's very good at learning things. It's very good at spotting trends, things that human beings are appallingly bad at. However, intuition, no. Being able to tie this stuff together and make judgment, no. And it's only as good as the data you feed it, which is the way the analytics of machine learning works. So for me, it's those trends. It's when we talk about observability, you know, how do you understand the internal health of a system from external metrics? And AI is really good at that. It's really good at going, do you know what? Nothing has gone near an SLA or an SLO. If you're familiar with SLOs from service reliability engineering, it's got nothing near, but that normally takes a minute and it's now taking 5, you know, hello. And it spots those. And what I liked, where I think it's really going, and I don't necessarily think it's quite there yet, is the point at which we stop having an incident, because the best incident is the one that never occurs. The best incident is the one, if it had occurred, it occurred before the customer noticed. And that's what AI is good at, is spotting something. It's like mean time between failures. We all know that the MTBF of that piece of equipment is, you know, 1 million hours, and it's now at 1.1 million. And everybody in the office is sat there thinking, one day soon. And And we know it's a mean, so therefore it could be 2 million before it falls over, but it will. Well, actually, AI can do that to us on a much bigger scale and to much more detail, and can predict where service usage is going long before we get there, and actually tell us to do something proactive. And that's what AI is really good at. And to be honest, that's what the cloud services have been doing for quite some time now, because load balancers and the way that they do provisioning on the cloud has been doing this for quite some time to predict patterns of usage and spin things up before they're needed. They're getting really good at that because there's money to be made. So there's lots of reasons for doing that really well. So that type of analytical machine learning trend analysis, yeah, I think that almost knowing what's going to go wrong before it goes wrong and gets us to head it off at the pass, that I think is going to be a wealth of learning. But whilst it's all great that I get 3 lines into a chatbot before I realize it's a chatbot these days, because they're getting that good. In fact, the only reason, Peter, that I knew it was a chatbot is because the answers were too slick. And that's when I realized it's not a human being. The answers were too good and came too fast. But fundamentally, we think that we could be replaced there. But actually what it's doing is freeing up those resources for that hand-holding, because no chatbot and no piece of AI is ever going to hold the hand of the managing director who's having a meltdown because something's not working. It's never going to do that human thing that we can do in ways that AI never will. And I think that's where sometimes we fear it when we needn't. It's going to be very good at doing the backroom stuff. It's going to be very good at trend analysis. But fundamentally, people need people. And that's going to be probably a move away, therefore, from some of the number crunching roles that people have now into more human facing, more, I hate to use the word soft skill because it sounds terrible, but what we know traditionally as soft skills, which some of us maybe might not be as well known for as maybe we should be. Because fundamentally what AI can do is take that heavy lifting off us and present us, but we've still got to make use of what it tells us with our common sense, intelligence, and human abilities to relate it. Because I don't think anyone's going to fall in love with their AI. I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Yeah, certainly no time soon. There's one of the things there that reminded me of a Douglas Adam quote, that 1,000,000 to 1 chances happen 9 times out of 10. So no matter how reliable you think your systems are. But yeah, I agree. It's one of the interesting things I see in the AI space is where there is the misapplication of AI to problems because there's a lack of understanding of what it is actually under the covers and what it is doing. So where you've got a customized algorithm that is pulling in lots of data and understanding about your systems to look for anomalous behavior, or to look for those shifts in trends across a complex environment, that's where AI really shines. And when we start to look at something like generative AI, where it's a large language model and it's really just interpreting it based on what's been fed into it and trying to work out what the next words to put together from that, you'll get varying results and not always the right ones, depending on how it's been tuned and the type of information it's pulling in. This is why you're seeing in sort of the big ones like ChatGPT, where results have got worse over time when they look at the quality of the results, like significantly worse. And one of the interesting underlying causes of that is that ChatGPT makes its money off the APIs, and so they make money by having an API that can respond faster. So you can make the API respond faster by segmenting data sets, restricting the amount of information it has access to so it can respond faster, but that also affects the quality of the results. So you get lower quality results faster, which is good monetarily for ChatGPT, but really bad if you're expecting a good result out of it. So to your point, Tomo, it's understanding the AI that you're using and what is it giving back, so that we as humans can start to interpret that and understand it. Where it can work very, very well and create information very quickly and pull information together. The idea, like large language models, I mean, one of the best interpretations I've seen of that is the idea that our world is so built from language that by building these models, we've created a model of our world through this model of language. And so the way that we communicate is encapsulated in the AI. But we are still a long way from AGI, like the artificial general intelligence, which is the sort of original definition of AI from the 50s that we no longer really associate with that term. We're really thinking about very specialized algorithms which will look at data and they'll dissect that data and they will provide you insights to it. And if you're looking at the right type of AI and the type of information, then it can provide you some very valuable insights. But you've still got to make a judgment call. And the advancements are obviously phenomenal, and we're seeing some great effects of that. But it's still got a long way to go.
So in general, we're talking about the fact that AI is really great in the sense where we're not so great as humans, which is pattern detection and learning our language, right? So it'll help us, understand resource demand and other such things before that we actually need it in the sense of service management, maybe also anomaly detection. But I do want to call out two things. One is the context is super important here and the training, so that may take time, and it depends on a specific use case of what your company exactly needs to do in order for that to be, as accurate as possible. But I also want to ask the both of you, are you concerned at all in terms of data privacy and security in terms of AI modeling for this specific use case?
I think one of the issues that we need to address here is ethics, in that you can be very unethical. So the example I use is any algorithm, for example, looking at insurance quotes for automobiles, for cars. Women are safer drivers than men. Sorry, the news is out the bag. But age bracket by age bracket, women are a safer bet. Therefore, women should be offered cheaper car insurance. That's what the algorithm tells us. Well, that was originally, but then we had an Equality Act here in the UK that stepped in and went, hang on, gender is not an attribute that we're comfortable using to differentiate services. This is ethically unacceptable. And so women in the UK now pay on average £75 more per annum to insure their car than they should do. And we men get £10 off our insurance because that balances out. But, be careful what you wish for. You might get it. But essentially, it's no longer an attribute that we expect a service provider to use to differentiate their services by. We've taken an ethical stand. And I think that's one of the problems, that just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. And the problem lies is that our friends AI and the algorithms are completely unethical. They have no idea the sociological meaning of what they're number crunching. It's just data. We need to, take our AI to one side and give it an ethical wipe over now and again to ensure that we're not having this dysfunctional effect, which I'm sure the original couchers of the setting up of this thing was not looking for. But fundamentally, there are, whether it's GDPR or any of the other legalities around the world, but, there are legal underpinnings. But there's also what our customers will feel is socially acceptable. And that also overlays, how they expect us to operate. So I think that it's probably a small area for, ethical AI. And I don't think there's going to be too many professors of ethics working in this field. But there's definitely room for it, because fundamentally, left to poor old geeks and techies like me, I'm afraid we are going to get our companies into all sorts of hot water, because we are just going to see the data rather than the story behind the data. Peter, I don't know if that's your experience.
I'd agree. I've got lots of stories along that from an ethical side too. That I'm I'm also thinking from there's the security side of this too, where the data that's pulled into that system is, in a lot of cases, if it's a third-party multi-million-dollar model, something like ChatGPT, for example, where they're sucking in data from all of these different data sources, you've got lots of different ways in which there's potential security danger. Like you're introducing data. Data has just left your company. It is existing in somebody else's database. You just shipped it out. You've now got information there that could potentially be retrieved or sent as a response to a query elsewhere. You've got information that could be correlated or misattributed, where you have, if you feed the model bad information, and so which introduces security holes into the system. So you now, when the next time the coder asks for a snippet of code they're going to put into their code, and introduce security holes into the product. You can have and the misunderstanding of the returned information and what that looks like and how that gets interpreted can be too. There is definitely quite a number of ethical and security problems with respect to the use, especially of generative AI, because of the way it works and what it really is. Whereas I think it's less likely in sort of more like the AI ops type space, where you've got a more sort of curated algorithm, which is basically looking at all of the operational inputs of the data and deciding where's the line of best fit and how are we going to group this data based on that, and then sort of interpolate from that into what is the state of your environment. That type of machine learning type algorithms are probably a little safer in that respect. So I think when we think of generative AI, which is what most people are now kind of are talking about, so I think that's where the root of the question was. Yeah, there's definitely some security and ethical problems with respect to that, without a shadow of a doubt.
So I'm going to stay on the topic of security, but I want to move away from AI, and I want to ask you, data quality and security are critical when we're talking about analytics, not necessarily artificial intelligence ones. What steps should organizations take to ensure data integrity and protect sensitive information in the context of IT service management?
Yeah, I think one of the problems that we have is that, simple things like, in the service desk, caller line identification means we know who's speaking before they speak. Yeah, what's the database that sits behind that? And have we got sufficient air gaps to anonymize data, where we stop there being this reverse osmosis where we can come backwards and relate the specific to the general? That often isn't easy to design in, but it's vital that it is. And there's also, I think, this problem we have is, what's the access? For example, what rights do my users need or have to what the service desk wrote about them in the service desk tool? Do they have a right to know? Is that a freedom of information request if I'm a public body here in the UK? In which case, what are the service desk analysts going to? Will it change the way they write what they write? So I think that there is always got to be how the anonymization happens, but also the idea of what's therefore their rights of access. Because remember, it's only that's personably accessible, which becomes discoverable, that we have to actually deal like this. So understanding and mapping that, and wherever we've got something that's personally attributed, that has to be declared. Here in the UK, we've got an information commissioner. They've got teeth. The fines are really uncomfortable, but it's a reputational issue. So we've got to be careful that in the much as we like good quality of service management, we also have to think about if we end up breaching these very simple rules, we end up bringing our organization into disrepute, which is what nobody wants to hear, because often we deal with people, should we say, not at their best moment. When somebody's irate on the phone on a service desk, you're not seeing the best version of them, and they might not want necessarily what they said to be repeated verbatim. So there are issues, I think, with how we handle this long term and what we need to keep and for how long we need to keep it. Because a lot of this is in the moment, but not needed to be kept long term.
So that brings up another area of retention. But Peter, what do you think about data integrity and security in this space?
I think it's important. I agree with everything that Tom was saying there. The tokenization, understanding who needs access to what data classification, understanding where those entry points are, where is that then being stored, so that we're not exposing data we shouldn't to the wrong people. I see this especially in younger companies or ones which are operating from a less technical space, where they're creating a delivery of service, but they're not applying good quality practices to it. There was a service I was signing up for the other day, for example, where they gave you a web form where they were asking you to put in the password. They obfuscate the password on the form, and then on the next page, they showed you the password in plain text, which tells me they're storing and transmitting the password in plain text as well. So that type of thing where it's like, well, if that's bad, because now you're visually showing the customer that you're not doing the right thing. But so I didn't give them the password. So that understanding, like, how are you capturing your customers' data? Where are you storing that? How is it classified? How is it exposed to your service delivery teams that need to then interact with that, such that you're not potentially creating privacy or security violations as a consequence?
Well said. What are some essential tools and technologies that organizations should consider when implementing analytics for service management?
I want to make sure we don't get into my tool's better than your tool conversation, because that's always happens when you ask this question. But almost all ITSM tools worth their weight in gold will spit out a huge amount of data. I don't think there is a problem with capturing stuff. I think there's a big problem with filtering it and working out what it's telling you. But my voice over IP will tell you how many rings it was before I picked it up, etc., 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 to the millisecond, how long it took to answer. And that data will get picked up and we'll be able to analyze it. The question, I think, has always got to be, find a tool that fits your needs. Don't find a tool, then find out what it tells you and then decide to think you need it. That's the wrong way round. Because if it wasn't important to you before, it's probably not important to you now. Because we've got to remember that perfectionism, and we often, we pursue perfection, but it's dysfunctional to expect to get it. We pursue it, but we'll never be perfect. And there's never such a thing as a perfect data set, and there's never such a thing as a perfect tool. Such a thing doesn't really, despite the hype, that's not really true. But the reality is, the best tool is the one that's fit for your purpose right now. But you're also got to consider, is it going to be fit to your purpose in a month, a year, 10 years time? And the answer is maybe not. But this idea that people ask me, how does improvement work with tools? And the answer is humility. You've got to admit that it's not so good now, so it could get better next time. And all of us have got to have that element of humility to say, do you know what? It's pretty good, but it's not as popping as it could be. That's really what I'm looking for. So when somebody wants to sell me a tool, it was never, we've got the most fantastic tool. Yeah, thanks very much for your time. It's the ones that came to me that said, it's a really good tool, but we're working on making it really greater. Never guess which one I hired, never guess which one I went for. Because actually, I don't really care whether your current tool is brilliant. What I want to see is a commitment to develop it. If I'm seeing, nothing on your user forum for 2 years, it either means your tool is brilliant or nobody's interested anymore. What I'm looking for is, do you have a lively community forum? Are you actively improving it? If so, then it doesn't matter what tool I think it is, you're going in the right direction with it. And it's the tool that will move with you, which I think is probably, the best use of one. But maybe it's just, oh, I've just used too many. Maybe it's just I've seen so many over the years. But whatever it is, it's got to be what, you know, Peter talked about a small company. You and I both know that their service desk tool is probably Excel right now. And we all know that's a terrible place to start. Nothing wrong with Excel. It's a very fine spreadsheet. It's a pretty terrible ITSM tool. But that's probably where a lot of them are starting from. I don't know if that's your experience, Peter.
Yeah, I would agree. It's the 80-20 rule, right? It's you'll never find a tool that'll do everything that you want it to do, and they may have aspirations to go in a particular direction. So you find the one that integrates in all the right points that you care about most at this particular moment in time, and that you think you can live with, and then you work with that one to move forward. And it has to be the company that you feel you have a good partnership with, and that you can work with, and that will do what you need to do moving forward. Having a data aggregator that is somewhere in the environment that can pull information from that service tool into some place where you can start to get deeper insights from different places. That is a key element of that too. I find where you've got some place which can then pull that information from the different places with the understanding that you're looking for. Where are the good APIs? Where are the places where that integration is going to work most smoothly and within your ecosystem? Which is why there's no one answer, because everybody's different. They've made different choices in the past. This is where they are today, and so they're going to have a different answer to like, what tool should I pick?
So it's very interesting because you talked about two things. One is the need for active community and continuous improvement of a specific tool that you're selecting, which continuous improvement is also one of the things that we're going to use analytics for. And the second thing that that was mentioned was the fact that all the tools are really good at sending you a heap load of data. I want to ask a follow-up question, which is how do we prevent alert fatigue at some point?
Well, this is where there's that conversation that needs to happen as to what is it we actually care about. Like, what is it we want to pull out of that mass of data that we have? Like, it's the difference between information and knowledge. Like, we can collect a whole ton of data, but really what we want are those insights, which are going to allow us to make sensible decisions about what's going on in our environment and the actions that we need to take.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, well, the secret's out of the bag. You know, everybody knows that computer systems break. You know, we have no user today thinks that it's perfect. You know, and that 1980s idea that we were trying to sell people that computers are wonderful, it never breaks, and it's better than we all know it breaks. What they want to know is, can we fix it, and can we fix it quickly? And when it does it fix well? In other words, have I got to start putting my data back in, or does it fix elegantly and take me back where I was when it fell over? So yeah, it's this. I think you've got to acknowledge the fact that some of the things that we used to worry about, we no longer worry about quite so much, simply because we're no longer maintaining that lie anymore, because people are much more familiar with the way complex systems work. But when the backup to a computer system is another computer system, which it is these days, it's not manual anymore. I think we need to, be open and honest about the analytics we produce. But you're right, some of the things we used to track now have less meaning today, because we're not often in the bare metal world where, the availability, the uptime of a server means anything. When it's a virtual server, we kill the minute we don't have a customer. So it doesn't actually mean as much as it used to. So I think one of the problems is, I always find that when I work with people, there are legacy bits of data that used to mean something like 3 generations ago that they're still swearing by, that they're still following. And you've got to say, but hang on, isn't this a cloud native application now? Yes. Well, then why are you measuring that? It doesn't tell you anything anymore. Well, because we've always reported it. When I automate your password resets is an excellent way of doing it. I can't do that. Why? Well, we've been reporting them as first-time fixes. every time somebody reset their password, that was a first-time fix at the service desk. It's going to skew my data if I suddenly stop reporting it. And you go, so you did it wrong before, which means you can't do it right now. There is this problem that I think that, yes, there's this sea of data we have to pick from. We've also got to recognize that we've had our favorites and we've had our dysfunction that we shouldn't be carrying forward, because just because we did it then doesn't mean we've got to do it now. And it certainly doesn't mean we've got to do it tomorrow. These are three different states and different places. But, it's probably easier for me to say that than do it, because you asked me back in my department in the day, did I have my pet metric? Absolutely. I'm as bad as anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, things definitely changed from when users were used to seeing the spinning wheel. Everything needs to be like totally fast and immediate. So I guess a lot of metrics also need to be updated as well. In your opinion, what skill sets are crucial for IT professionals looking to work with analytics and reporting tools in service management? I'm especially asking you as fellow ambassadors what people need to do in order to get the skills.
So in terms of skills, I mean, it's the skills that a data analyst needs. So the curiosity, I think, is probably the largest one. It's being open-minded as to and being objective, the ability to step back and be objective as to like, what is the data actually telling me and how can I start to look through it? And then of course there's a whole list of technical skills, and Python and others which probably come at the top of the list around languages you pick to how do you start to work in that data space. But it really depends on the environment you're working in and the tools that you're working with as to what exactly the right set of skills is going to be. But that's why I start with the things that we want the individual to have. So good analytic skills, good problem solving skills, curiosity, and that objectiveness, the ability to take a step back and really look at what the data is telling them, rather than the person who's yelling in their ear about the result that they want, and see what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think that we also need to think, I remember we did the European computer driving license, and we used to talk about, digital literacy. People have to be data literate. I think there's a broader education piece so that people know what they're being told and have realistic expectations of what data analysis will tell them and what it won't tell them or won't easily tell them. Because I think part of the problem that Peter was saying there is often people ramp up their expectation of this piece of magic wand that somehow we put it into Power BI and it spits something out and it's going to be, the truth. And you're thinking, well, no, it's having that maturity of understanding around data. So I think big data, literacy training is something that everybody needs to get. People are going to turn around and say, but hang on, he's a trainer. He would say that, wouldn't he? Well, of course I would. But that's besides. As an ambassador dealing with people on my courses, talking about this, their problem isn't so much that they haven't got someone in the back that can do the analytics. It's when they've got the data, does everybody understand it and have those skills to interpret it? And data literacy should be like numeracy and language literacy. It should be something that we're teaching in schools. It should be something that people are able to do. But unfortunately, I don't think that's necessarily true. And I think that with a lot of our apprentices, and sadly with people quite, people coming on the DevOps leader course, people at the other end of their careers, it's still true that they're relatively data illiterate. And so, yes, it's a two-pronged attack, I think, that you do need to look at those specialist skills of the data analytics persons, but you also need to look at those, general analytics and understanding amongst the general population.
Yeah, the basic math skills It's the differences between mean, median, mode, why you look at ratios versus
This is
looking
a good place to apply AI, right? And how to figure out my data.
Yeah, I had this one once. I had this one once. You love this one, all right? We're talking about mean and mode. Somebody said, half my incidents are actually taking longer than your mean time to restore service. Well, of course they are. That's why it's a mean. But yeah, it's. I was speechless trying to explain that one. I just thought, I can't help you. I'm sorry.
So we have about 10 minutes left. I want to ask you, looking ahead, what emerging trends do you anticipate will have the most significant impact on reporting and analytics in IT service management?
Other than all the ones that we've been talking about?
Well, we've talked a lot about AI, but do you think there's other trends that are worth mentioning?
Some of the standardization of protocols from logging and management, those types of things, which are starting to gain traction, create commonality in the way data is presented, which makes it easier for us to start with that aggregation. So I think that in of itself has been a long, long time coming. But that piece is going to make the reporting back more easier, because one of the common problems that you often see, especially in more legacy environments, is that, well, we didn't realize that data feed is no longer working, so we've been calculating and presenting all these information for months or years without actually realizing that we didn't have all that information that we were looking at, and we ended up taking poor actions based on that, and because the data was incomplete. And this type of behavior, where you can start to have more trust in the data, because and it being easier to pull it out, I think that's going to be a trend moving forward.
I certainly think the visualization tools have got a lot better, Peter, and that was probably true. But I also feel that, things like value stream mapping and other these techniques, we're now not just mapping the value streams, we're expecting at each step to pull out data. We are now far more familiar. And I think that's a trend going forward, that when we take our data and then ally it to things like value stream management, we'll suddenly be able to see the relevance of our measurements in ways we never saw it before, because we're seeing this convergence with value stream management tools and service management tools. I'm with, I thought I heard somebody say I think it was Charity Majors, I think, from Honeycomb, but she said, one day all these things are just going to be the same thing. They're converging all the time. And of course, I take her point. I think they are. I think we're going to see more convergence. I think that it's going to become easier to join these things together than it's ever been. But whether we will ever get to the point where it becomes seamless, I don't know. I think they're still going to need somebody around the back with a wrench and a hammer, making these things, putting these things together.
Yeah, I think the biggest danger there is that if there is nobody around the back with the wrench, the hammer, who still understands how this works, when it does break, and it will, then there's nobody who knows how to fix it.
Yeah,
well, there's security for you, right?
Yeah, and I think that's true of a lot of these things that have great promise, is that we still need people who at the end can operate this. It's great doing process automation, but we don't then automate everything and then fire the automation engineer. You still need somebody who understands, how does all this data pipeline get automated? And we talk about data analytics, but we need some people who do data ops. We need people who do that day-to-day support and data operations. You might say, well, it's just maybe data scientists are over here and analysts here and data operators down here, but they're the people who are needed. They are the people with the wrench and the hammer who need to maintain these data pipelines alongside all of this other stuff. And can I ever see the day where you don't need one? or you don't need that skill set. Even if you don't need one person to do it, you certainly need somebody with that skill set. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
Yep. Okay, one last question I think we have time for. How do you measure the success of an analytics-driven IT service management initiative?
Do you want to take that one, Tom?
Yeah, okay. I saw the bus coming, so I'll dive underneath it. Well, of course, if we really knew that, do you really think we'd be here? We'd be on our speaking tour having written a book. I think that, like all in these initiatives, whether it's going to meet its promise is not the measure of success, because almost all of them don't, because that's the reality. What I think we need to look at is, have we moved the needle? Is where we are better than where we used to be? And if so, by how much? And I think that you need to measure a transformation on two levels. One, the thing that you're transforming. And the second is your progress in the transformation. And you shouldn't muddle the two. They're two very different measurements. But fundamentally, we want to be on top of the mountain looking down where we were in the valley. And if we're only on a hill, well, it didn't go so well. And it's about realizing that it's a direction and not a destination, because it's so easy to go out to get your money for this and for the training and the investment and then overpromise and underdeliver, and it is so easy, and of course that makes it doubly difficult to move forward from there again. So I should say it's about reasonable expectations, but anything's got to be better than nothing, and a bit better is still a whole lot better than where we used to be. Which isn't really an answer, I realize.
Yeah, so Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot because the people listening, they want actual KPIs. So we mentioned a few things during our discussion today. One, you just said, I'm investing a lot of money in all these tools. At the end of the day, how do we calculate the ROI? If I was able to prevent an incident, how do you put dollars on that? So that's like my first question.
So we had this conversation on a panel the other day. I think the number they came out with was like 360,000 for a minute or something, which was, so if you had, or I can't remember the exact ratio, but a very large number for a set amount of outage for a customer. So, and there's obviously, and this, by the way, is a pure example of why data is so bad, because you can prove anything with it. And I'm just pulling numbers out of thin air. So when we look at this, there is definitely the ability to associate what is the cost of an outage to be, and what happens in my environment if the service is unavailable. And I can look at that from a number of different lenses. So if I'm looking at the environment, I'm saying, hey, I have a quality issue. I have a problem where I'm losing money because my service isn't available. And then I can look at an analytics for and say, well, if I bring in this analytics program, my goal might be to, how do I reduce the number of incidents I'm having? How do I look at the sort of the impact of that? But it could also be like, how can I learn more and faster? How can I reinforce the system? How can I look at the good things in my system and make them better, so that I know that I've got better understanding of how the system is operating? Now, articulating that in a particular set of KPIs, I mean, you can go through things like OKR exercises, work out like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Like, what is the hypothesis you have about that?
What would you think about adopting DORA metrics for this problem?
Well, DORA metrics tell you about continuous delivery. They don't necessarily tell you about.
Well, they tell you about stability and reliability of the platform, right? Because you have there also the mean time to resolve and how change failure rate and others.
Yeah, they tell you whether you're getting good at delivering things into, like making changes to your services into production. So they tell you that. And then if you look at the full suite of like everything that's an accelerate, then you get a more complete view of what service delivery is potentially starting to look like. If you just pick the top 4 metrics, you need a bit more than that, really, because they really are focused on continuous delivery. Like, am I good at continually making change to my production services? That's what it's showing you. And that isn't necessarily everything that you need to know about whether your services are being delivered well and that your customers are getting the value you need. You're going to need other metrics as well to help inform you as to whether you're actually delivering what you're supposed to be.
Yeah, well, Talmo also offered the value stream metrics, which definitely fall hand in hand with these.
Absolutely. And my secret sauce is error budgets. If your error budgets are not being burnt down to zero, then you're leaving stuff on the table, and your reliability, you're not investing forward you're not making reliability a first-class customer. Because every time you're that little bit too perfect or more perfect than you need to be, that's stuff you've left on the table that you could have used. So for me, error budgets in real time, absolutely, because I want to ensure that I've got the balance between stability and reliability and innovation correct, without harming my customers.
I agree. We need to wrap up, but I want to thank the both of you. I want to thank the audience for joining us today to consider the relationship between service management and digital transformation. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists, Peter and Talmo. Next up in the ITIL programs is How Service Management Improves Cybersecurity on Thursday, September 28th at 11 a.m. The registration page is pinned in the chat. So thank you for everything, and I'll see you later.
Thank you very much, Eric. Brilliantly run.
Yeah, wonderful job.
Nice to